Welcome, everyone. We're glad you're here. Thank you for joining us today on this Friday evening, regardless of where you are. We know you're busy with the holidays, and we hope you all are well. We welcome you to the Every Brain Matters live stream event called Hemp Madness: What Families Need to Know About Delta-8 and all the THC variants made by the hemp industry. I'm your host, Aubrey Adams, and I'm the director of Every Brain Matters, a community of support and advocacy based on science and lived experience. We hope to raise awareness on the harms of the marijuana and drug culture expansion. We are excited tonight to bring you this important information. We ask you to please like our live stream and share it. This information is not well known, and we need to empower our families, our communities, and our legislators that these products are dangerous and addictive and are leading down the path to death. So today we're going to start out first with our advisor, Jay LeBlanc. He is an expert researcher and knows a lot about chemical engineering. So he's going to share the science on how the 2018 Farm Bill, which legalized hemp, which legalized CBD, and the hemp industry is now taking all the surplus of CBD and converting it into THC products. So he's going to share that science with us. And then we're going to be joined by Ellen Snelling, who's going to share the advocacy work she is doing with this issue and a call to action. And then we are bringing on 4 family members who have been very impacted by these policies and unfortunately have lost their loved ones. And we're very grateful that they're willing to share their voice with us tonight. So without further ado, I welcome Jay LeBlanc for joining us tonight. We are so grateful for his research, his expertise, his professionalism on this issue. So I'm going to share his slide. So welcome, Jay. We're glad you're here.
Hi.
Um, okay, I think I have your slides up. So
Yeah, I see it.
okay.
So before I start, I want to thank Aubrey for allowing me to actually speak about this topic. I wrote this about a week or so ago. It's been heavy on my heart, and I just wanted to get the information out there. And then one last thing is Aubrey was generous in calling me an expert in chemical science. I'm really a mechanical engineer. I'm more of a researcher, analyst. That's what I did in my before I retired, was looking for unintended consequences, risk assessments, things along those lines. And when I look at this debacle, it's really troubling. So, and I want to thank everybody who's on this live broadcast. I'm hoping it enlightens you. And the other thing too is if I get to a topic or a slide that doesn't really make sense, I mean, feel free to, I guess, instant message Aubrey, raise your hand. If not, we can do the Q&A session because it's really important that you understand all of this stuff, the science and also the mathematics behind it. And you'll know what I'm talking about, the math, when we get to the kind of the detailed definition of the hemp in the Farm Bill. So if you could advance the slide, Aubrey. So the objectives today are to talk, at a high level about Delta-8 THC and THC-O, so you can kind of get an idea what the hemp industry is doing. And then we'll have a real quick review on percentages. And then we'll do a deep dive in the 2018 Farm Bill, basically the definition of hemp. What exactly are they meaning when they say the word hemp? And then we'll cover all the hemp-based products that we know of today. I'm sure there's some out there that I may have missed. And then we'll look at a map, basically is showing where Delta-8, THC, and the other synthetics are legal, regulated, or banned. Okay, next slide. So a little Delta-8 history. So Delta-8 was first synthesized way back in 1967 by an Israeli chemist, Raphael Mechoulam. It exists naturally in a cannabis plant, but what's really important is that it's only in very small amounts or not at all. And if it does exist, from what I've read, it's about 0.1%. Therefore, the molecule needs to be synthesized chemically to obtain adequate amounts for study, or in the case today, enough to sell it on a commercial basis. And that's due to the rarity of the Delta-8 THC molecule in the cannabis plants. So the 2018 Farm Bill caused a marketplace glut of CBD from overproduction, and the subsequent rush to cash in on that low price CBD was done by selling Delta-8 THC, because it can be manufactured directly from CBD using some chemicals, which I'll talk about shortly. For those who don't know, Delta-8 THC reportedly has similar but milder mind-altering effects when compared to Delta non-THC. When I say Delta non-THC, that's the THC that is most prevalent in the marijuana plant. That's what everybody's worried about with this psychoactive component of it, causing psychosis, paranoia, anxiety, etc. Okay, next slide, Aubrey. So there's multiple concerns when synthesizing Delta-8 THC from CBD. So the synthesizing of this drug may not be done in a manner that guarantees the safety of the consumer. Keep in mind, a strong acid and an organic solvent such as toluene, which is normally used in paint products, are used, and the resulting product needs to be washed in a base in order to neutralize any of the residual acid that may remain after the chemical reaction. And also there will be some remaining organic solvent that needs to be removed too. And there's also other byproducts that need to be removed. And many of these byproducts, what's really scary is they're unknowns. And we'll talk about that shortly in the next slide. And it also includes traces of Delta non-THC. So basically it's a wild west for the consumer. Few, if any, testing protocols exist, and regulatory oversight is almost non-existent. Okay, next slide. So this is an important slide to be aware of, and this is off of ProVerde Laboratories website. That's a testing lab for cannabis products out of Massachusetts. So a couple important details here. If you look at the peak in the middle, you'll see the Delta-8 THC. So that's the peak for that particular molecule. And to the left of it, you'll see a little peak of Delta non-THC, which is basically the THC that would be in marijuana. But what's really troubling here are the question marks. And there's 10 question marks, and one of the question marks points to 4 other peaks. So if you count all the unknowns, including the question mark pointing to the other 4 peaks, those are all unknowns. They don't know what molecule that is. And I've actually called the owner of this company and talked to him about this. And, it's not in the National Institute of Standards database. And they just have no idea what these molecules, chemicals are. So you can imagine it's a big unknown. Go ahead, Aubrey.
Yeah, so Jay, you're saying all the peaks with the question marks are chemicals in these vapes that we have no idea what they are.
No idea. I mean, they don't even know how to name it. There's no name for that particular molecule. You could say like it's this Frankenstein molecule. So that's what people are ingesting when they consume Delta-8 THC in probably most cases. Like I said, this is a lab analysis for this particular sample. For others, I don't know, but this is one of the issues that the owner of this company has with testing any of the Delta-8 products. Okay, next slide. Okay, the side effects. So Delta-8 THC has reportedly weaker side effects than Delta non-THC. It's reported to be about 1/3 less potent. And keep that in mind, 1/3. But we know Delta non-THC with all the scientific studies that go back to the late 70s and 80s also, that people for some reason aren't aware of. It has many unwanted side effects, include cyclic nausea and vomiting, which is a classic CHS or cannabis hyperemesis syndrome, anxiety, paranoia, etc. It can also trigger mental illnesses such as psychosis and schizophrenia, especially in teens with a developing brain. And the question is, could these same side effects, even if slightly milder, also apply to Delta-8 THC? Only time will tell, because there's really no current research, but anecdotal evidence is saying an emphatic yes. And I think Aubrey and the parents online right now can attest to that. Again, there's no current research on the long-term side effects of this this drug, Delta-8 THC, and anyone using this product basically becomes an unwitting participant in a science experiment. So, I mean, you could extrapolate, Delta-9, Delta-8. I mean, it may be 1/3 less potent, but you could easily see that could cause addiction, serious mental illnesses, and or physical harm such as CHS, since the molecule is very similar to Delta-9 THC. Okay, next slide.
Sure. And stay tuned, everyone, because we have the families to prove that this is happening. Thank you, Jay.
Yeah, we're just looking at the tip of the iceberg right now. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the THC-O acetate, and keep in mind it's also known in short form of THC-O. So THC-O acetate is formed when the THC molecule goes through a process called acetylation, or you could say it's acetylated. And this occurs when an acetyl functional group is added to a chemical compound using acetic anhydride. This is a similar process discovered and used in the late 1800s, basically 1870. It's used to convert morphine into heroin. And we'll get into more of that detail shortly, and you'll see why why this THC-O acetate or THC-O is so dangerous. THC-O acetate was first formulated way back in 1895 by three chemists, Wood, Spivey, and Easterfield. And acetylated Delta-9 THC was found to have a greater potency than the other known cannabinoids way back in the 1940s. And all this stuff that I'm talking about is actually in these references below. So, I mean, you can get this presentation from Aubrey. You can do your own research, but this is nothing made up. All this stuff is in the references, online references that are easy to access. So I made sure people, all they gotta do is click it and go for it and read it. Okay, next slide. So what's interesting about this molecule, it was actually considered for use as a Cold War weapon. This molecule was even considered by the United States Army during the Cold War as a possible chemical warfare agent to physically incapacitate enemy troops. Most of the experiments using various THC analogs and derivatives were done at the U.S. Army laboratories at the Edgewood Arsenal in Maryland. Initial testing were done on dogs. It was done by Adams and others, and it caused loss of leg muscle control. Okay, next slide. Okay, now we're going to talk about the chemical acetic anhydride that converts, your Delta-9 or Delta-8 THC into THC-O acetate. The chemical used in the acetylation process is, again, called acetic anhydride. This is some important stuff to consider. It's a DEA listed chemical regulated by the Controlled Substances Act. It can be used to produce heroin for morphine, and also it can be used to produce a quaalude, which is a sedative. And also it can be used to make a precursor chemical to make amphetamine and methamphetamine. And by itself, acetic anhydride is also a highly corrosive chemical. It can irritate or damage the skin, eyes, and lungs, depending on the concentration. And also it forms poisonous gases when exposed to fire, and that would include excessive heat. So you can imagine the grave bodily harms incurred if this chemical is not properly handled in a manufacturing facility, or if the THC-O acetate is not properly processed and is later smoked, vaped, or dabbed. Because when you smoke, vape, and dab, some vaping devices do have a adequate thermostat, but from what I've read, most of them don't. And regulating the temperature with a dab or just burning the substance, that's not proper temperature regulation. A lot of smoke and chemical byproducts are going to be formed. So you could easily see if they had some residual acetic anhydride and THC-O acetate that people would buy, it could definitely damage their lungs. Okay, next slide.
Jay, is it true that you were sharing that one of the pesticides, if it's in there and it's heated, it can turn to cyanide?
Yeah, that's in another slide presentation I did for Isaac. That's a really, really long one, but yes, a lot of those chemicals, it's basically a presentation is cannabinoid combustion, and we get into the chemistry and details about what potentially could be formed when these substances are heated. And the temperature regulation on a lot of these devices is almost nil. And you wind up having devices that have temperatures up to 900 degrees Fahrenheit, if not hotter, before they initiate the dab. That heat is what's causing the vaporization and the smoke, but there's a lot of dangerous byproducts.
Wow.
Yeah, it almost sounds like science fiction, but it's not. Okay, here's some little tidbits about the acetylation process. And I don't mean to get too technical about this, but it's really important to kind of get an idea, how this is all tied together. So the acetylation process, when applied to morphine, produces heroin. Remember, it goes from opium to morphine. They acetylate morphine, it produces heroin. This is the scary part. It increases the blood-brain barrier penetration of heroin 100-fold when compared to morphine, which is a reason why heroin is so addictive. Heroin is also reported to be 2 to 4 times more potent than morphine. THC-O acetate is reported to be 3 times more potent than Delta-9 THC. Therefore, it's very likely that THC-O acetate is going to be even more addictive as well when compared to Delta-9 THC based on how acetylation can increase the potency of a drug. Okay, next slide. So now we get on to THC-O from Delta-8. And you can see this product here, Blackout, kind of a, I don't know where they get these names from, but it's THC-O, or, that's short for THC-O acetate. It's an acetylated molecule made from Delta-8. So thanks to the 2018 Farm Bill, THC-O is now being made from hemp-derived Delta-8 THC. This product will basically have the same potency as Delta-9 THC. Remember I talked about earlier, Delta-8 THC was 1/3 of the potency of Delta-9. So if I acetylate it, then it's going to be increased by a factor of 3. So 1/3 times 3 is 1. So now it's back up. It's basically the same potency as Delta-9 THC from marijuana, and perfectly legal in all too many states. Does that make sense, Aubrey?
It does make sense. And for our viewers that are joining us, because we've had even more join us recently, these products that Jay is describing here are legal through the federal government through the 2018 Farm Bill. So they're more potent than the Delta-9, he's saying, which makes them more addictive and more dangerous. So
yeah, I mean, if you acetylate Delta-8, you're basically up to the potency of Delta-9, and there's no limits on how many milligrams they have in the product, which Ellen has a good slideshow to show that.
Yeah, and some people have referred to the Delta-8 as marijuana light, or THC light. I've heard that.
Yeah, if you look at this, look at this package. It has THC-O Delta-8, 2 grams. That is 2,000 milligrams. 1 gram is 1,000 milligrams. So that's 2,000 milligrams of THC. And we'll get into this later, but I guess I need to kind of talk about it now. In Colorado, by state law, 1 serving size can only have 10 milligrams of THC, and 1 product can only have 100 milligrams of THC. So this thing has order of magnitude more, times 2. So yeah, I mean, it's just the Wild West. So just remember, a gram is 1,000 milligrams, and we'll get into that math shortly. Because the devil is literally in the details.
Yeah, and I don't mean to interrupt you too, Jay, but what blows me away, and I know we're going to learn more about this when Ellen comes on, like if somebody would consume this product, it would taste awful to them because it's a chemical product, but they mask it. It says strawberry kiwi on the side of it to mask the fact that this is poisonous for you. This is poison, but we're going to mask it with these flavors so you consume it, so few people get rich while you become addicted and maybe psychotic. It just blows me away that our federal government is allowing this.
And while you're talking about that, another key point is a lot of the online retailers will advertise it as being natural, because it does occur naturally in the plant, but it's just a minute amount. But whatever THC you buy, THC Delta-8 you buy, regardless of the form, it's synthetically manufactured using an acid and some type of organic solvent. They can adjust that to get different yields, and they may use citric acid or something. It's not always a dangerous acid, you could say, but it's still, if it's still about the strength of the acid, and do they neutralize it, because that could still damage your lungs if you smoke it. So yeah, it's crazy what's being allowed. I mean, this I kind of get a righteous anger when I see this. Every time I read it, it gets me a little more angrier that our legislators have allowed this, but not to digress. So we'll get into that shortly. So next slide. So now I want to get into a slight bit about percentages, because this is really important to know as we kind of get into the weeds, with literally the weeds of the hemp bill. So, and I know some of y'all may know this, but I know I kind of bounced this off on my wife's head, and she was a little fuzzy on what 0.3 or what a decimal place like 0.3 or 0.5% means. So we'll start off real simple. So 1% is basically 1 divided by 100, or 0.01. So it means one part out of a total of 100 parts. And if somebody doesn't get this, just stop me and just flag Aubrey. So let's use a pizza example up at the top. A pizza can be cut into 100 slices. So 1% of that pizza would be 1 divided by 100, or you could basically say it's 1 slice out of a 100 slice pizza. Okay? So always remember the number that comes before the percentage sign is divided by 100. That's an easy way to remember it. For example, 5% is 5 divided by 100, or if you want to put it in decimal form, it's 0.05. And then 25% is equal to 25 divided by 100, or 0.25. And then, so what confuses people is a number is less than 1. What you do with a number less than 1 before the percentage sign? What does that mean? Well, the same thing. So 0.5% is equal to 0.5 divided by 100. So you can just do the math off of that and disregard the percentage sign. Does that make sense, Aubrey?
It does make sense, and I'm not good at math, so I think it'll make sense to the
Yeah.
viewers
So
too.
this is a real important concept to get. Next page, slide rather. Okay, so what does 0.3% mean? It's significant of 0.3. It's used in the hemp bill to define hemp. Okay, since 1% is the same as 1 over 100, or 1 part out of a total of 100 parts, 0.3% is going to be 0.3 divided by 100. Or moving the decimals to the right. Remember in school, you could, if you move the decimals to the right at the numerator, denominator, top and bottom, you basically end up with 3 over 1,000, which is equal to 0.003. So as a kind of a refresher, the decimal point location, for a regular whole number, it'd be, beginning with 1, it's 1.0. We don't worry about what's after the decimal point because it doesn't mean a whole lot unless you're doing some type of engineering work or science work. So the tenths digit, 0.1, you move the decimal 1 place to the left. And then for the hundredths digit, the 0.01, you move the decimal 2 places to the left. And for the thousandths digit, 0.001, you move the decimal 3 places to the left. So with all of that in hand, 0.3% is equal to 0.003, or 3 divided by 1,000, which is 3 slices of pizza out of a 1,000 slice pizza, as an analogy. Or let's use weight units, because that's what we're going to wind up with at the end. So that would be 3 pounds out of 1,000 pounds. That would be 0.3% of 1,000 pounds would be 3 pounds. Okay.
And for the viewers, this is what we're talking about, the weight of THC in the hemp plant. This is what they legalized.
That's where we're going with this. Okay, next slide. So the units of weight that we're familiar with, and there's others, but pound, ton, gram, milligram. And milligrams are abbreviated mg. I know you've seen that on your vitamin bottles or medicine. Okay, gram and milligram are metric weight units. Okay, and the milli before the prefix for milligram basically represents 1/1,000. And it's derived from the Latin word milli, which means 1,000. So 1,000 milligrams is equal to 1 gram. Does that make sense? Okay, so back to the 0.3, or 3 divided by 1,000. That represents 3 milligrams out of a total of 1,000 milligrams. So we know that 1,000 milligrams is equal to 1 gram. So when you do the math, you basically end up with 3 milligrams per 1 gram. Okay, just keep this ratio or number, however you want to term it in your head, keep that in your mind. This is really important to understand. This 3 milligrams per 1 gram. Okay.
Well, hang with us, viewers. We'll get through this part.
Yeah.
Because it's really important.
This is so important. And this is where, it's sort of a smoke screen they're using. Because, you say 0.3%. Well, that's not a whole lot. Well, yes, it is. Okay. The 2018 Farm Bill, the actual name is the Agriculture Improvement Act of 2018. So hemp in that bill is defined as, the term hemp means, and this is directly from the bill, that's why it's in quotation marks. The term hemp means a cannabis sativa, L, and any other part of that plant, including the seeds thereof and all derivatives, extracts, cannabinoids, isomers, acids, salts, and salts of isomers. I know some of these words people probably haven't seen before. If they have, they don't really know what they mean, but we're going to get into that shortly. Whether growing or not, with the delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol or THC concentration of not more than, guess what, 0.3% on a dry weight basis. And that dry weight basis just means there's no water in it. I mean, it can have oil or anything else, but, no water. So that's where that 0.3% on a dry weight basis comes from. So again, it's important to understand every word here so you can really understand what this hemp bill is allowing. It's really disgusting. I'll just take on it. Okay, next slide. So now we're going to break it down. So what is the 2018 Farm Bill saying? Okay, so I highlighted in blue sort of what's in the official definition. It's not only the plant, okay, the hemp plant, but it also includes any part of that plant, which are roots, flowers, stems, leaves, including its seeds. And this is where they're getting people at. And all derivatives. When they say derivatives, that means anything made from the plant. Basically, they can start with the plant and add other substances, anything they want, including the acids and organic solvents, to make something else. That's perfectly legal. And then we have extracts, and those are the concentrates made from the hemp plant, usually the drug cannabidiol or CBD. I mean, they can use propane, butane, CO2, critical CO2 extraction method. There's different ways of extracting these oils, plant oils, from the hemp plant. And here's some examples. You can have an orange, or you can have orange juice concentrate. I mean, they crush the oranges and they get the concentrate. You got to add water to it so it's not too strong. Or more related would be a THC 20% versus concentrated, and that could be in a dab or a vape pen cartridge or cart. That's what I know. That's the slang they like to use. And also cannabinoids, and these are naturally occurring or synthetically created drugs from hemp extracts. Okay, next slide.
Yeah. And just to clarify, cart is short for cartridge. It's the cartridge that goes into the vape pens. That's so if you hear your kids talking about carts, that's what they're talking about.
I use the slang term in case they ever hear it. But it's cartridge. Okay, isomers. This is a technical word that most Americans do not know. And it begs the question too. This is some of the questions I like to ask the legislators who voted for this. How many of the U.S. legislators knew this term when they voted for the U.S. Farm Bill? Okay. Now the DEA has a simplified definition of this. I didn't want to really get too technical with this, but it's basically isomer is a drug that is different from another in how it looks and acts, but has the same number and type of atoms. For example, THC and CBD are isomers of one another. And why? Both have the same number of carbon atoms. 21 has 30 hydrogen atoms and 2 oxygen atoms. And this is written in a chemical formula, C21H30O2. Just like we've seen water, H2O, there's 2 hydrogen atoms, 1 oxygen atom. Everybody knows H2O. Well, this is the chemical formula for CBD and the THC analogs. They act differently in the body. They look different too. When I say look different, the chemical structure of it. So if you can go to the next slide, that'll help explain what I'm talking about. So here we have cannabinoid isomers created from CBD. And, we have and I know this may look like Greek to some people, but just bear with me. But I mean, just think about it like Lego blocks or a picture or something. You can see the CBD molecule has a certain, design or structural arrangement. Better say, let's say it's a structural arrangement. But if you look at the Delta-8, 9, and 10 THC molecules, they're slightly different. So if I have some CBD, put some, this is real simplified, but I put some acid in it, an organic solvent, maybe a little heat. Actually, let me back up. Actually, they have to do this in dry ice because it's an exothermic, or it releases heat reaction, and they have to keep it cool so it doesn't explode. But I don't want to get into those details. But if you notice the Delta-8, when that happens, you have the Delta-8, 9, or 10. But if you notice, the hexagonal rings are closed. It still has a little tail off to the left, and it has the kind of the main molecule, the main hexagon with the 3 dashes around the circumference of it. But then the other hexagons are closed up. So basically the Delta-9, L8, 9, and 10, you've got 3 hexagons where the CBD molecule doesn't, but it does have that tail, and it does have the same number of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen atoms. And if you look at the Delta-8, 9, and 10 molecules, there's not a whole lot of difference, except if you notice where I have the red circles, you'll notice there's 2 parallel lines within the circle. Basically, the Delta-8, that 2 parallel lines, it denotes a carbon double bond. So it's that carbon double bond is in the 8th position on Delta-8. On Delta-9, it clocks over counterclockwise 1 position to the 9th position. And then for 10, it clocks counterclockwise again to the next position. And while we have these molecular structures up, when these are heated, they start breaking down. And all of these little branches and hexagons will kind of break up into other molecules. But in this particular molecule, if you notice, in the center of it, there's a hexagon with 3 of the little parallel lines. Basically, those are carbon double bonds. And that molecule, once the heat breaks the molecule apart, what you're left is benzene. And benzene's a carcinogen. I mean, it's in gasoline. That's a very dangerous chemical. So that's what happens when you heat these chemicals. The structure breaks down. The strongest structure stays intact, and that is the benzene molecule. Although you put enough heat, that'll also break down into a different molecule. But that's why when you heat this stuff, it doesn't always just vaporize it. It also decomposes the molecule, and which you can be left with is a benzene molecule. And you may have another little branch. I mean, I don't want to get into toluene, et cetera, but I got a whole other presentation on that. But yeah, that's what you wind up with when you heat this molecule, is that central benzene molecule, from dabbing and vaping and smoking. Next slide.
Thanks, Jay. We've got about maybe 5-6 more minutes left for your presentation.
Okay, I'm almost there. So
thanks.
Yeah, so the other thing, acid salts and salts of isomers, we're referencing drugs. These are drug forms that may or may not be active initially. And once in the body, they can quickly change into an active drug. And I had a pharmacist help me with this section. So I feel very positive that it's very accurate. And in the Controlled Substances Act, it's important to remember that it excludes the terms acid, salts, and salts of isomers. It uses the exact same terminology of controlled substances, such as those of LSD, THC, and other Schedule I drugs, since these inactive drugs can easily be converted into associated controlled substances. Okay, so another question I'd like to ask the legislators who voted for this and the authors. Did some of the authors in the 2018 Farm Bill know this fact? If so, why did they include these drug forms in the definition for hemp? Was it just to encompass all the possible drugs that can be made from this plant? I think so. Okay, next slide. Okay, whether growing or not. So hemp does not have to be a living growing organism. Hemp could therefore be the plant oils, including the natural occurring and synthetic cannabinoids, seeds and grains, and dried plant matter such as flowers, leaves, fibers, stalks, etc. The possibilities of hemp-derived THC products are therefore limitless, with only one exception. Okay, next slide. So here we get into that 0.3%. So Delta-9 THC concentration cannot be more than 0.3% on a dry weight basis, or less than or equal to 0.3. So if there's 0.31% or more Delta-9 THC, now it's considered to be a marijuana plant. So what is legal? So we've got up to 3 milligrams of Delta-9 THC per gram of product dry weight. So keep in mind, an average raisin weighs about 1 gram, and a dollar bill weighs about the same at 1 gram. So if you look at the nutrition label on a Tostitos corn chip, basically one serving size is 7 chips, and 7 chips weigh 28 grams. So each chip would weigh 4 grams. So if these chips were made from hemp seed flour, which could easily be done, one hemp chip could legally contain up to 12 milligrams of Delta-9 THC.
Wow.
That would be, 4 grams. The weight of the chip be roughly 4 grams times 3, 12 milligrams.
And
Okay,
we
next
know
slide.
we know 10 milligrams of THC can induce psychotic symptoms.
Yeah, and that's up at the max THC limit, allowed by federal government. Okay, next slide. Okay, in Colorado, we've kind of talked about this before. Delta-9 THC is limited to 10 milligrams. Basically, it's one serving size. And also, 10 milligrams of Delta-9 THC is a maximum FDA-approved dose for some approved drugs, such as Marinol or Dronabinol, for people who have cancer. And one corn-based corn chip, with using that 0.3% limit, would be 12 milligrams in Delta-9 THC. So it's approximately, but actually it's over the legal Colorado limit for a THC serving. And another thing to keep in mind, one serving size of Tostitos corn chips is 7 chips, which weigh 28 grams, and that's only on the nutrition label. And this serving size could contain up to 84 milligrams of Delta-9 THC. And if you had the whole bag of chips made from hemp, similar to these Tostitos, that would be 12 servings. So that would give you 1,008 milligrams of Delta-9 THC in the bag, or basically 1 gram of THC. Okay, next slide. So gummy bear math, what nobody wants to talk about. So these horrible gummy bears you can buy in any store. I looked up the nutrition label, serving size is 30 grams, the number of bears, and that serving size is 13. So if you notice it sort of in the middle of the page, per gummy bear gram. So it's 2.31 grams, the weight per gummy bear. And then the milligrams of THC that would be is the next circle, the 6.9. So one gummy bear could legally have 6.9, could round it up to 7 milligrams of THC. So you take 2 of those, you're up to roughly 14 milligrams of THC. And I know some of the ones you can buy with Delta-8 are even higher than this, but legally they could still have Delta-9 THC at this potency, roughly 7 milligrams per gummy bear. Okay, next slide. So what's the big takeaways? Any product derived from hemp is federally legal to make, market, and sell, even Delta-9 THC. The only THC molecule that has any sort of limitation is a Delta-9 THC molecule. It is not being prohibitive. Keep that in mind. It's not prohibitive. It's only limited. And that limitation is based on a dry weight of 0.3% or 3 milligrams of THC per gram of hemp-derived product dry weight. And this is important to keep in mind, too. The other THC-related molecules that can be created from hemp have no limits, none whatsoever. Okay, next slide. So what are the synthetic, we're almost finished. What are the synthetic products currently being made from hemp-derived CBD? So here is a list, and like I said, at the end, the list is slowly growing, but we have the Delta-8, 9, and 10, THC-O. We have HHC, which is hydrogenated THC, is where they inject hydrogen gas into it. It has some extra hydrogen molecules, and it extends the shelf life. We have HHCO, THCP, THCH, and THCV. Okay, next slide. So there's an online, you can go online and check out this seller. They have door delivery service. It's called Binoid. They have these federally legal products available. Delta-8 THC, and we talked about it earlier. It's 1/3 of the potency of Delta-9. They have Delta-9 THC, but it's limited to 0.3% by dry weight. Delta-10 THC-O acetate created from Delta-8 THC. We talked about that. We have the hydrogenated THC. Okay, next page. And then here's some of the newer products. We have THC-O, which is, again, when you see the O, it means it's acetylated. So it's advertised as being 1.5 times stronger than HHC. Keep in mind, acetylated products such as heroin, acetylated morphine produces heroin, and it's advertised to be 2 times to 4 times as strong. This is the one that scares me, THCP. If you look at the last quirky dot, it's reported to be 30 times as strong as Delta-9 THC. I mean, 30 times. So, what is that going to do to a young person's mind? Who knows? Next slide. And we also have THCH. It's reported to be 10 to 15 times as strong as Delta-9 THC. And lastly, that I know of, there's THCV, and that's about 25% as strong as Delta-9 THC, or about half as strong as Delta-8 THC. Okay, next slide. Okay, so where are hemp-based synthetic cannabinoids legal to purchase? And this is by state. You can see the legend, the red ones are illegal, the greens, all too many, are legal, and the yellow were either regulated or it's unclear if it's legal or not. And this was updated July 5th, 2022. Keep in mind, Oregon was a regulated state, but that ceased to be July 1st, 2022. They completely made it illegal. So I live in Texas. So, I mean, they sell this stuff at vape shops, CBD shops like American Shaman. They're out here, you know, they're too close for comfort, you know, gas stations, etc. So that's where the kids are getting it from. Okay, next slide. Okay, final point. The 2018 U.S. Farm Bill has basically legalized, at least at the federal level, all forms of the THC molecule, including, as we saw earlier, a significant amount of Delta-9 THC. Focusing only on marijuana legalization may no longer be a smart strategy going forward. The THC genie has been let out the bottle with the 2018 U.S. Farm Bill. Hemp-based products that are reported to be up to 30 times more potent than Delta-9 THC, we saw that with the THC-P, are now federally legal, although states can ban specific hemp-based products. Okay, next slide. And I want to thank everybody for listening. Hopefully this was informative. I didn't mean to stretch it out too far, but there's a lot, like I said, the devil's in the details. But what concerns me most is I can't believe all these legislators approved this hemp bill. And to me, it sort of reflects a dereliction of duty on their part for public safety and health. So thank you again. And I can't wait to see Ellen's presentation.
Yeah, wait till you see right in. You're in shock with this science part of it. Wait till you see what Ellen's about to bring on the screen. And Jay, we thank you from the bottom of our heart providing this very detailed research that you have done. And exposing the truth about the 2018 Farm Bill and what our federal government has legalized and made available, so easily accessible to our children. So we thank you. Ellen, if you have like the stream on behind you or something, you might want to click off of it if you're on social media. I hear a little feedback. I'm not sure where it's coming from, but just make sure you're clicked off, and then you can go ahead and share. I'll introduce you while she's checking that, guys. We welcome Ellen Snelling. Ellen Snelling is, I have a lot of wonderful favorite advocates. Ellen hears all the time about what a fan I am of hers. And I think there is some feedback. Can you guys, the ones in the studio, can you hear some feedback? I think it's because she's checking it out. I'm clicking off any kind of social media. I'm going to go ahead and just click that and see. Does it end it? Yeah. Okay. While she's checking that out, Ellen does some great work. You're going to see, you think Jay's slide presentation is very shocking to know that these products are legalized through our federal government. And Ellen is about to come on and show us even more shocking things, because she's actually gone to these hemp conferences to look at their products and learn from them. So I'm going to bring Ellen on here. I think we still do have some feedback. Let's take a second and see if there's something we need to talk about.
Not really on anything, but there is one noise that I hear. Let me just turn that off to see if that might be it.
Okay, so hang with us, guys, here, and then when Ellen's getting ready for her presentation, now we have 4 family members in the queue that are coming here to share from their heart and their stories and how these products actually led to their loved one's death. So these are not safe at all. Okay, let's see. Back. I think we still got some feedback. This is it's okay. This is what happens when you're live. But we have been having webinars where we're providing information and educating everybody, but we wanted to go live stream so we reach a broader audience. So if you are watching right now, we ask you to share this on every platform you can. Ellen, let's have you talk again and see if the feedback's there.
Okay. Is there feedback or?
No, I think it's better now. So you
Okay.
can go ahead and do you have your
Okay.
slide?
Now, the only thing is I don't see my slides, so I'm not
Oh,
sure.
okay, I think I'm going to upload it here on my end because what I see this? It's all of us on there.
Okay.
It's not necessarily coming up the right way. So what I'm going to do, if you want to just get started and kind of introduce yourself, Ellen, I'll get your slideshow uploaded here. Just
Okay. All right. My name is Ellen Snelling, and I'm the chair of the Hillsborough County Anti-Drug Alliance and involved in several organizations trying to help keep kids drug-free. I personally have a daughter in recovery, and that's why I've been involved with prevention for actually over 20 years. But I'm very interested in the topic of Delta-8 and
Hey guys, I think we had a little technical difficulty. I'm going to call Ellen right now and say jump back on. Sorry about that. Bear with me for 1 second here.
Signing back in. I don't know what happened.
I know. I don't know what happened either. It's okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, here she's coming back on, guys. So bear with us 1 second here. If you guys please make some comments in the chat, that'll give us more. Here we go. Here's Ellen. And here is her slides. So we're back up and running. Yeah.
all right, we better get going before anything else happens.
I know.
All right, thank you so much. And again, you can go on to the next slide. I'm going to be talking about advocacy around Delta-8. So you know all the chemistry. Luckily, I don't have to talk about that because Jade did a great job of it. So I'm going to tell you what these chemicals look like in the real world. So what type of Delta-8 products are we seeing out in the public? We see edibles, candies, vape products, carts, flour, which is smokable, oils, capsules, beverages, chips, cereals, inhalers. In other words, pretty much everything you can think of can be laced with Delta-8. Next. This is something that I was able to purchase at convenience stores near me. There's a gas station maybe a mile from my house. It's also near a university. And I was able to get all of these products. And you can see, I'll go to the next slide. You can see how close some of these look to real children's candy. This is the main point to get everyone's attention, whether it's parents, teachers, guidance counselors, legislators. Once you show them how close some of these candies are to real candy, any child would mistake this. So you see the real Skittles on top in the red package, and then look at the blue package. What's the difference? I mean, there's very little difference in these two packages. So the logo looks almost exactly the same. So any child would easily mistake these and eat them. You can see on the bottom, the blue package, there's a tiny little pot leaf in the corner, and it says Delta-8, 250 milligrams, but it doesn't even have the word THC. There's no way to really know what's in this. Next, please.
Yeah, Ellen, it floors me that it says medicated on it. This is
yes,
medicated
so
original.
Medicated, and I found with this industry, I feel like it is a go around with medical marijuana, because in Florida, which is where I live, medical marijuana is legal, but recreational is not. And I think that's why they're preying on our state, because they're trying to backdoor recreational. But at the same time, they're undermining our legal medical market, because they're telling people, oh, you don't need your medical card. You don't have to pay for a doctor's visit. Just come in here and you can buy your quote unquote medicine. And that's why I think it says medicated. So this is what I do. Okay, so when I find out there's a problem, I try to get into the weeds. And in this case, there's an industry out there. So you've heard of big tobacco, big alcohol, big marijuana. Well, now there's big hemp. So the hemp industry is, we need to get to know what they're thinking and what they're doing, because they are preying on our children. So a look inside the industry. A friend of mine, Teresa, and I found out about this. It was in August. It's called KushCon. And it was a hemp industry showing off all that they have, the latest and greatest. And what we found after we went there is that Delta-8 is kind of their #1 product, and they're making the most money off of it. So they were promoting Delta-8, but not just Delta-8. Just as Jay said, there's so many new molecules and isomers coming out of hemp, and they had pretty much all of them on display. Next. So here's Teresa and I, we're undercover, right? So we go into the KushCon Hemp Festival, and we wanted to try to fit in as much as we could. Okay, so maybe we were a little older than some of them, but nevertheless, there's people there. Actually, it's like people that are interested, people that want to buy, but it's also people who want to start their own business. So that's kind of we were kind of like, oh yeah, we're going to start our own business. All right, next please. So this one slide, I think, says it all, and it's kind of the name of this whole, event that we're having today, Hemp Madness. They actually had a huge poster that said Hemp Madness, and I think that's what it is. It's like, whoever would have thought that hemp, which I always thought, oh, CBD, rope, materials, different building products you can make from hemp, it's fairly innocuous, right? Who would have thought they could take hemp and CBD and make so many different intoxicating compounds that can poison our children? Next, please. And this is the other thing that really bothers me, is that they are definitely marketing to our kids. They say it's for adults. They'll say, oh, it's 21 and up. I mean, but it's like wink, wink, nod, nod. Because here we have Jolly Cannabis. And if all you remember Jolly Rancher, this is very similar. And they have a lot of cartoon characters. They have a lot of fruit flavors, bright colors. I mean, if this isn't marketing to kids, I don't know what is. Next, please. And here's another one. Okay, this is called Slumped, and it's SLUMPD. And their mascot is a teddy bear, and it's got one eye open, one eye with an X on it, and it looks like it's messed up, right? And they think this is all a joke, but they're using little teddy bears to advertise their product of how to get wasted. And I found this to be a very pervasive theme with all of these products. And most of these are very high in Delta-8. I'm going to go over some of the numbers in just a minute. Next, please. So here's one example. So you want to know how much is in a package? So you heard in Colorado how you can have a total of 100 milligrams in a package of marijuana, Delta-9 THC, and each serving is 10 milligrams. Well, there's no limits on Delta-8 and Delta-10 in the THCP. So this particular one, 3,000 milligrams in one package. This is just like a regular size package. You can see the hand back there. It's not very big. And it only had, I believe, 10 gummies in there, and each had 300 milligrams in each one. Definitely enough to send an adult to the emergency room. And that's what I'm seeing when I go to these shows, is they're going for higher and higher concentrations, and also they're mixing. So it's not just Delta-8 anymore, like they're all blending, and they have THCP, THC-O. So honestly, you don't know what's in there, and it could have contaminants, it could have solvents, who knows, but they're mixing the molecules to make these more, I guess, to try to sell them. So these are really strong, heavy hitters. Next, please. And when you go to these, they give you free samples. So Teresa and I each had our bag, and we collected our samples. And this is what I got in KushCon. This wasn't even all of them. This is like half. But they have Moon Rocks, which was smokable. And then they had a bunch of candies, different types of gummies. And then that cookie that you see there, that actually is 250 milligrams of Delta-8 THC baked into a cookie. And I mean, it looked delicious. It looked like something you would get out of a bakery, but it didn't even have a label. It didn't even say it had 250 milligrams. In this particular show, they allowed children, and we were very concerned that a child could just pick it up. It was right on a table where a child could pick it up. Next, please. Oh, can you go back to that for a second? I just wanted to. So when Teresa and I were in some of the educational sessions at KushCon, we were sitting there listening, and we saw paramedics carrying an adult out the back door of the convention center. And then we talked to the security guard afterwards, and he said that 3 different people had to be transported to the emergency room because of eating edibles at this event. It blows your mind. I mean, here they are giving you things to eat for free, and then people are having to go to the hospital. Next, please. So this was This was on Veterans Day. They had another expo here at our convention center. This is called the Alternative Products Expo. And they had other things there like kratom, mushrooms. So, but the main feature again was Delta-8 and the other isomers. This particular one, I know that we're smiling, but like I said, please remember I'm undercover, right? So we don't want to stand out. This is Death by Gummy Bear. And I know you're going to find it as hard to believe as we did, but this mascot of this product, which is called Death by Gummy Bear, and they're gummy bears that have 100 milligrams each of Delta-8 THC. So you can see what this bear looks like. He's got little X's on his eyes, blood coming out of his eyes. And this is, and it's a product that actually could kill a child. Next, please. Here's another. The displays were kind of similar. They were very space agey, like, oh yeah, eat this and go out in outer space. And that's the way they're selling this stuff now. And it's actually true. It's awful. I mean, this stuff can cause hallucinations, paranoia, and psychosis. Next, please. This was in that same display called Looper, which is a company, you can look them up. But these are their THC gummies, some of the different ones they had called demos. And any child would love this. It just looks like so delicious for a child with the bright colors. They're all fruit flavored, they're sugar coated. And you can see the packages behind, which are, again, bright colors, very attractive to children. And yet they say that they're marketing to adults, but they're not. Next, please. And this is another product with loopers, and it's called Break the Orbit, 100 milligrams per gummy. This is what I'm seeing now. They're very, very concentrated, and a lot of them will have THC-O mixed in with the Delta-8. And the one that I went to most recently, they had warning signs up, maybe because of what happened at the last one, but they had warning signs saying these products being offered may have psychoactive effects, but it's the sole responsibility of the consumer to understand this. So in other words, it's all on you. Next, please. And this is just something that I wanted you to take a look at, our Poison Information Center. And you can look at this in your own state to see how many people are already being affected by this. And what we're finding is in 2021, there was 197 total exposures, and many of them were children. But in 2022, we were already up to 220 exposures as of October 5th. So we're going to far surpass that this year. Next, please. And another thing that I do when I do my advocacy and when I'm trying to educate people is give examples of children within your state or within your locality that are affected. And this is the first story I saw that drew me to this whole problem. And I thought, I have got to do something about this. So a family was visiting Florida from Ohio, and they stopped at a smoothie store. They were offered cannabis enhanced smoothies or regular, kid friendly. And the mom said, I don't want cannabis. This is a child, 3-year-old. I want it regular, kid friendly. So she got the child a cake pop. Well, within an hour, the child became very sedated and had to go to the emergency room and was diagnosed with marijuana overdose. The cake pop actually had contained 100 milligrams of THC. And so she went back to the shop the next day and told them, they said, oh, I'm sorry. And I mean, it's just so mind boggling that this can happen, where a child can be poisoned and there's nothing you can even do legally because it's legal in Florida. Next, please. And this is the child. This was in Newsweek. So here's a family coming to visit the tourist state of Florida, and her child ends up in the emergency room because of Delta-8 THC. Next. And this is what it looked like. And of course, any kid would eat this. I mean, it looks delicious. Next, please. So this was my second example. A child was poisoned by Delta-8 in Tampa. One time I was on a television show because I had gone to our county commission talking about Delta-8. I was interviewed, and then the next day I get this email. Someone looked me up and found me, on the internet, and said, thank you so much for your focus on Delta-8. My 10-year-old was accidentally poisoned last year at a home show in Tampa by eating an entire bag of Delta-8 Fruit Loops that he got off a vendor table. It's horrible what happened to my little guy. He had to go to 2 different hospitals and spent the night in the ICU at Johns Hopkins, which is our regional children's hospital. And it turned out THC poisoning, and he got it at a home show. And I'll show you, the next slide will show you the picture of the product. So this is what the vendor table looked like. He went back the next day to see what happened. And you can see there's Fruit Loops, there's Stonios, there's things that look like Cap'n Crunch. They're all look just like children's cereal, but they're full of THC. And the package this child had was called Fruit Loops. It just says Delta-8, doesn't even have the word THC. Then it finally says, 600 milligrams. But the parents had no idea because it looked like regular cereal. Next, please. So what can we do about this? I mean, we're all, this is just mind-boggling. And when you see this information, you feel like, what can I do? So this is from the Community Anti-Drug Coalition of America, CADCA. And they have some handouts and to help explain some things that you can do. But first of all, you have to just educate and explain to leaders what is going on. These things in Florida are for sale at corner stores, grocery stores, vape shops. So they're very easy to get. They don't have warning labels. There's no age limits. So these are the problems. So what can you do? You talk about it, you educate, and then we've got to get our community leaders to make some changes. Next, please. So Delta-8 THC policy. First, you want to look at your state. Is it legal in your state? Okay, if it is, then you need to take your next steps. So first of all, contact poison control in your county and get exposure data. Do environmental scans of the gas stations, smoke shops, convenience stores, and hemp festivals. In other words, go there, take pictures, and take notes and see what's going on. And that way you'll have more and more data. You educate government officials, school board, law enforcement, universities, everyone that you can catch their ear. And then reach out to media, write letters to the editor. Again, you have to magnify your voice. You have to find partners. Everyone has to work together, and then you try to get it banned in your state. Next, please. And this is just one example. When I went to the county commission and gave a report, then I had called the ABC Action News beforehand because it all kind of worked out great. And he came and watched the county commission meeting and then interviewed me and did a 6-minute segment as an investigative report. So things like that really help get your message out. Next, please. And so we're at the end now, and I wanted to talk more about Every Brain Matters. And there you can see that Aubrey is holding the brochure that we're going to be telling you about. This is what it looks like. If you see over on the left-hand side, just go to the website and you will find it right on the front page or under resources. It's a little booklet that you can print and hand out to legislators and your friends and neighbors so that they will know all about the chemistry and the issues that are surrounded by this Delta-8 and the other isomers. Next, please. And one other thing about Every Brain Matters, they have all the references you can imagine. So every single thing is backed up by science. That's why it's such a great resource. They have plenty of things that you can print yourself, you can make posters, but it's all backed up with research. So you can go to this link and get your cell phone out, go to the QR code, and you'll be right there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ellen. That is shocking. It is shocking that this stuff is legal and they claim they're not marketing to children. So thank you so much for your advocacy work. Now I'm going to bring on the families that have been impacted. And they're brave to come on here. We're very grateful for them. I just asked them before they come on, make sure you guys don't have any social media signed on as I bring you into the live stream. And we'll have them introduce themselves, share a few minutes of why they're here, and then we will open up the live stream for Q&A. So here we go. We're going to add Jennifer Starkle. Jennifer, we welcome you. And we'll get then we're going to add on Sonia Jimenez and Alex Hess. Thank you for being here, ladies. And now we have Rita. And let's start with Jennifer. Jennifer, can you introduce who you are and why you're here?
Yes, I'm Jennifer Starkle. My son Nathaniel, who was 26 years old, committed suicide on August 13th of this year while we were in the house. we later found his toxicology report came back, and the only thing it showed was caffeine, but the only thing they listed was that the test for Delta-8, and they said there was an interfering substance. I have not been able to get more information from the medical examiner at this point. We had no idea it was vaping. I found from his credit cards that it looked like he had just purchased the products probably about a week before it happened. That week he was just really off. He wasn't himself, but it was the little things, in hindsight, they add up. But when you're going through it, you can't quite put your finger through it. Nathaniel wasn't one that did any kind of experimentation of drugs that I'm aware of. We actually, homeschooled them, and so we were very close knit. And he was still at home at 26, but very responsible, full-time working, very, very kind and gentle. And that week, while he's normally quiet, he just was abnormally so and giving short answers. And we would ask him over and over if he was okay. At one point, I got to the point he didn't go to work that week. We continued to ask him what was going on. At one point, I asked him, I practically begged him to please tell me what is going on. And he said, China's going to kill us all. And I'm like, it just threw me for a loop. So we had a talk. I thought it went well. He went to work that Wednesday. I thought he went to work. I later found out that his boss said that he had packed up his stuff, like he was quitting, and had ended up driving him home because he was vaping behind his truck. And he said he talked with him for hours, and he was talking about the end of the world. All this entire week, packages are pouring in. Mm-hmm. I later found out he told his coworker that he spent all but about $400 of his savings on survival gear, and like camping gear and MREs and all that kind of thing, nearly $20,000 worth. And these were pouring in. So obviously that was alarming to all of a sudden get 8-10 packages a day. After his death is when we found the vape. One of the vape cartridges was partially used. It was a combination of THC-0, Delta-8, and Delta-10. Again, those credit cards show he just had bought it. It was only in that week he changed. I wholeheartedly believe that is what caused him to commit suicide. Nothing else adds up. Nothing else makes sense. I described to my therapist, who actually specializes in psychosis, what happened. He saw the text. Nathaniel had sent me this really weird text that the night that he killed himself. And he said, yeah, he was definitely at at least a moderate psychosis, and was likely hearing voices. So
thank you, Jennifer, for sharing that and your courage to speak. And it's just been a few months since your son has passed, and the Evergreen Matters community, and I'm sure everybody here gives you our deepest condolences, and thank you for being here. Please stay on in case somebody has a question for you. Thank you for being here. And Rita, we welcome you too, and thank you for being here. I think you're muted. Please introduce yourself and let us know why you're here and why this issue is so important to you.
Hi, my name is Rita Edborg, and my son Brian was 19, and last year in October, he shot himself at our residence. He was hallucinating, and he had drew out a bunch of pictures. And when she said some of the symptoms that her son was going through, it really hits home because it relates to me, because it makes a little bit more sense of what their mindset was. Like Brian would talk about how he unlocked dimensions in his brain, and how he felt like he did talk about hearing voices, and how he felt like we're killing the planet and the world's coming to an end. And it was very unusual behavior for him. And I mean, his own physician even said, well, she 100% believed that, that contributed to Brian committing suicide. And it was out of nowhere. Like, I was supposed to go home the next morning and cut his hair. And that's, that didn't end up that way. And I've been to many gas stations. I travel the world for work. And I don't know how many times I've been offered Delta-8 or Delta-10 or Delta, whatever you want to call it. And even my 17-year-old daughter has been offered it at the local gas stations. And I'm just flabbergasted at how, and I mean, I get kind of not belligerent, but irritated because I'm like, you don't know what this is doing. This is not your normal THC that you're on the shelf selling. And these kids are getting a hold of it. And I've had several parents, because I have a legacy page for Brian, that contact me and are like, hey, my kid's hallucinating, or hey, I found this in the room. And these are 14, 15, 16-year-old kids that are getting their hands on it and having bad reactions to it. So it happens to kids, it happens to adults. And I live in Illinois, there's no regulation to it. You can buy it everywhere. And it's just sad to see. I mean, Brian was funny. He worked.
Mm-hmm.
It was a lot like Jennifer said, my son, he was loving, caring. He had a full-time job and he worked hard. But once he went from smoking THC, he got his hands on the Delta stuff. And when he passed away, we probably found 30 cartridges that he had been smoking in his room.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was like an obsessive amount of this stuff. Well, I feel like the more he thought he unlocked his mind, and
Mm-hmm.
he wrote about, hey, I'm hearing voices, but I know it's not God, and they're telling me to do things.
Mm-hmm.
I think it just overwhelmed him. And I think raising awareness and letting people know you're not, I felt alone for the longest time. Like, people thought I was crazy. Oh, Delta didn't kill your kid. He killed himself. Yep. I've had death threats when I went on the doctor's show about how, I'm putting a bad name to Delta, marijuana. I mean, it's been a rough ride, but I feel like coming forward is the first step to make changes. We have to make changes for our kids and for future kids, because it's not just us that are going through. There's so many parents that have contacted me, and it's sad to hear their stories, because I know what they're going through, just like all the moms on here know, and family members know what they're going through. I mean, it's horrible.
Thank you, Rita. We give you our deepest condolences, and you are so right. I think Jay called it righteous anger, and we all have every bit of right to be angry about what's happened, and you all have paid the ultimate price of the incompetence of our federal government and our state government. So, I think that the viewers, I hope they understand the courage it takes to come forward publicly like this, and especially after you've already been featured on The Doctors and gotten those threats. Like, these families
honestly, it was more threats over Delta.
Wow.
It wasn't so much threats over the THC. I mean, and this is what I explain to people, I can't control what an adult does. If you smoke THC, that's your prerogative. Right. That's your choice. You went to dispensary. Right. I can't control that. Right. But what I can control is this fact that it's being sold to minors.
Yeah, that's right.
That's ridiculous. The kids' brains are not equipped for the drugs that they're selling and legalizing. Well, but I had more threats over vape shops. Local vape shops were angry that I'm having a voice against it. And then my local community, like, I have a beautiful backing of followers locally. So they were against the vape shop. So they're like, we want them out of our town. We want this to be taken off the shelves, but it's not enough people coming forward. It's such a big industry. So the more that comes forward, I feel like the more of an impact that's going to make. Yeah. So I'm hoping raising awareness, people will come forward and be like, let's, let our voices be heard, and our kids, didn't die in vain, and they'll save lives by, helping and protecting other kids. So,
yeah. And what is the name of your Facebook group again, Rita, so people can join you there?
It is Brian Fuller Legacy.
Brian Fuller Legacy. Mm-hmm. And then you can also join Every Brain Matters at everybrainmatters.org, or send us an email to get more information about how you can connect with these families. So thank you, Rita.
I just wanted to mention real quick, Aubrey. I know Rita had mentioned the products far as adults. I guess one of the alarming things for me, I mean, obviously Nathaniel at 26 was an adult, but that packaging had no warnings whatsoever of the effects that has. It said plus 21, and that literally was all that had on it. So I honestly don't believe Nathaniel had any idea that would affect his brain.
Well, and I believe that too. Brian was 19. So a lot of people are like, well, he was 19, Rita, maybe. And when he did, another thing, when you talked about the autopsy, when they did Brian's autopsy, the only thing that was found in Brian's system, because honestly, I thought that he had gotten a hold of THC that was laced with something. So they only found Delta metabolites and THC in Brian's system. So he was 19 though. Brian was buying it himself. So I don't mean to, I just feel like
I didn't take it that way. I just wanted to make sure.
I just feel like Brian seen that it said THC or had a pot leaf on it and thought, oh, well, I can get this at the local gas station for $20 or however much they're selling it for. And I can still feel high like it would because Brian wasn't old enough to go to a dispensary. So I feel like it was easy access to him. Mm-hmm. So, and like I just told my aunt, because I'm actually in Tennessee visiting family, I'm like, if it was, they're calling it THC light or they're, calling it all these different names, why isn't it a dispensary?
Right.
If it's so great for you, why isn't it a dispensary? A lot of the dispensaries won't even sell Delta products.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it says medicated. If it's medicine, why isn't it treated like medicine? So,
right.
Yeah, for sure. And all good points. Thank you for sharing with that. Okay, let's go to Alex Hess and Sonia Jimenez. Sonia, would you like to go first and introduce yourself and tell us why you're here and why you care?
Sure. So we live in Texas. We live in Houston, and I lost my son, Josh, last year, December 23rd, 2 days before Christmas. He committed suicide. He was 22. He started smoking weed in high school, but I really didn't know. None of us knew that he was smoking weed. We didn't see any major signs. I mean, his grades did start dropping, and there was a little bit of defiance here and there, but nothing, too concerning. Then he moved out, and then he had his first, right after graduation, he moved out, and he had his first psychotic break at 19, and then 2 more followed. And then he was hospitalized every time. But it's really pointless. I mean, we were so new to it, we didn't know what to do other than to hospitalize him. But basically, especially here in Houston, they know nothing about cannabis-induced psychosis. So every time he went, they did find weed in his system, but it's like, so he's bipolar. It's like, no, he's not bipolar. And also the problem was because of HIPAA, I couldn't give any information. So they just went off of the psychotic person, no background, nothing. So what they'll do is keep them like for 5 days, and they'll sedate them, and they sedated him on all these antipsychotics, which he is not even bipolar. That goes completely against what he needed, But anyway, then they send him home on all these antipsychotics every time. But he would recover each time. It was worse, and he would always go back to it. I don't know why. The last one was from Delta-8. So, and the last psychotic break, it was probably, they were all really bad, but this one was so different. And he did the same thing on spending money. He had been saving money all summer, but once that Delta-8 kicked in, he blew $2,000 in 1 week. He just started ordering all this crazy stuff. He heard voices. He actually thought people were in his room. These demons were, whenever he would be sober, he was he had PTSD because when he would think back to his psychotic breaks, he was sure that there were demons in his room and there were people, and he heard voices. And his was more of a spiritual thing. It was more like he was God or God was talking to him. And so finally, just in December, I just watched him. There was nothing else. I wasn't going to send him back to the hospital for what? It was pointless. There was nothing I could do. The thing is, what people need to understand is once they go into that psychotic episode, their brain is like hijacked. You cannot reach them. There's nothing you can say, nothing. They are in another dimension. All you can do is watch or send them to a hospital. But, there's nothing that can be done. Absolutely. There's no help. There's absolutely no help. So finally in December, his voices, which every time he had a psychotic break, his voices would tell him to go to LA because to go save the people from darkness. It was always to LA. And so he worked whenever he was okay, he would work as a server, and he worked at Whole Foods too. And he did great. I mean, Josh was such a sweet guy. He was, every time I talk to mothers, everybody says the same thing. I mean, Josh was so gentle and so kind, so creative. He was, of my 3 kids, he was the one I would have least expected to ever have a problem with drugs, ever. So anyway, so in December, right around the holiday, it was just insanity what I was watching in the bedroom. I mean, it was like he was a demon. It wasn't even my son anymore. What he would talk about, he was very much into like Greek gods and stuff like that. Yeah, and also into the Aztec gods, and something he was never interested in before. But he knew everything about them all of a sudden. He was drawing all these demonic pictures. When he'd be in psychosis, he would draw very dark stuff. It was really scary. So anyway, he said he was going to move out, and he packed his, suitcase. He called an Uber, and he said he was just moving out. But Alex found his Twitter, and turned out he went to LA. And then anyway, so we talked to him. We wanted to get him home, and we got him a ticket. And on his way home, he was already coming down from the psychosis, and I think he was just done. He couldn't do it anymore. He was so done with he couldn't live like that anymore. The voices, and so he stopped in Pecos, Texas, and he killed himself with the train. He walked into the train.
Thank you, Al. Thank you, Sonia, for saying the truth of what happened with your son, Joshua. It takes a lot of courage and strength, and we appreciate you, and we send you our condolences. Alex, do you want to talk a little bit about your brother and how this affected you as his sister?
Absolutely. I think a big reason why I speak out about this, in honoring Joshua's memory, like when I think back to my memories of Josh, it was, he was always drawn to the vulnerable, the, shy, there were never any outsiders around Joshua. He was just such a kind and compassionate person. And I feel like if Joshua were with us today, he would never want anyone else to go through what he went through, and certainly not their families. I am 30 years old, and I talk to my friends about this all the time, that in this short time between when, high school and college to, we're all like newer adults, the world has really become a terrifying place on every single, like marijuana used to be the harmless one of like, out of all the things that you could do, the one that was like, again, obviously we know it's not harmless, but it was not even that is safe anymore. And just, in Houston, I was just reading an article that said that across Texas Children's Hospital, there's been an 800% increase in acute mental visits into their ERs among children and adolescents, and they have nowhere for these patients to go. That's 400 to 500 per month. Now, I'm not saying that these are all related to Delta-8 or marijuana, but the point being that, especially coming out of the pandemic, children, adolescents are as vulnerable and impressionable as they've ever been. And when you have this marketing that's like, ooh, look at this fun, whatever, or they're bored, or they're, lonely.
Or they think it's the natural way to treat depression or anxiety. So I think a lot of our high schoolers and middle schoolers are dealing with anxiety and depression and ADHD, undiagnosed ADHD. Josh did have ADD. We all have it. And when he was just on his medication, it was great. He was fine. But he obviously had other issues going on, personal stuff. And he always was an overthinker his whole life. He was very sensitive. So, who knows? I mean, so in high school, he wanted to quiet those voices or that pain. And actually, I will say this, whenever, so they would send him home on antipsychotics, which was horrible. They never follow up, and I'm just like, he was a complete zombie. And I'm like, no, get off of all of this. And then I would go to a psychiatrist and say, please put him back on his medication and an antidepressant. I would tell the psychiatrist what to give my son. Okay, let's try it. Then it would work. That's how he was always able to go back to work. Because, moms would be like, how is he working? It's like, first of all, I got him off of the other stuff, which may work for some, people, but it wasn't what worked for Joshua. And
well, for a lot of these people, again, they tried to say like, oh, well, it was underlying bipolar schizophrenia, but it's like, well, they never had that problem before.
Right.
It only happens when they're using this product, and then once they detox, then their brains go back to normal. And last time I checked, schizophrenia and bipolar are not temporary things that you just get rid of.
Rita is going to say something, and then Jennifer's going to say something.
That is exactly, when Brian passed away, the coroner said, we're going to rule this as suicide due to bipolar depression and schizophrenia.
Oh my God. No.
Here's my issue with that. And I told the lady, you listed it however you want.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh my God.
I didn't have life insurance on my son. I never even thought that was never, you don't think your kids are supposed to bury you and not bury your children. So I never had that. So I'm like, you list it how you want it. I don't care. But I can tell you 100% Brian was not schizophrenic.
Nope.
Yeah.
I can tell you he was ADHD and had
exactly. That's a problem. I think a lot of these. Yeah, you're right.
And I think, is that a correlation? Their mind works differently. I'm ADHD. My mind works differently than somebody else that may not have that. So you add a stimulant to an already mind that races. You don't know what that's doing to that mind. So how are, that could be a correlation to, this is why it affects some people differently than others.
Rita, and so here's another thing that me and Alex were talking about is that, and I don't want to go into it too much, but ADHD and major depression go hand in hand, and it kicks in more once you're in high school, which that's what happened to her in high school. Like one day, like that, suddenly depression kicked in. She just stopped. I thought she was doing drugs, but she wasn't. But depression just kicked in hard. But since I already had depression, I recognized it right away. I took her to a psychiatrist. She got on antidepressants, and boom. But had it been at this time, she's the one I would have probably thought would have, used. But back then, there was no Delta-8. And like you said, Mom, I don't remember anybody having a psychotic episode or anything. Everybody smoked weed. But now it's just like, now what's out there, this stuff is absolute poison. And my question is, I don't know who can answer this, but why is it still being sold? Why is it that a pine or pine sol is being taken off the shelves? It hasn't killed anybody, but there's some kind of bacteria in it, and it's taken off the shelf. There's a recall. Like I told Aubrey, it's like Bluebell ice cream, I don't know how many years ago, what year it was, but oh my God, they found something in it, I think.
Listeria.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody died. Did they? I don't remember. Anyway, every shelf was cleared. We went months without Bluebell. I mean, they shut everything down. The baby formula, but no,
Right.
not
Don't
Delta-8.
take off Delta-8 because it's a money grab.
It's fucking untouchable. I'm sorry, but it's untouchable, and it's killing our children. It's causing brain damage, and nobody can sue them. It's being sold. It's not regulated. I mean,
and here's what I was told on that, because a lot of people ask me, why didn't you sue Delta-8? You know what I was told? You can't prove it. You can't prove it.
I attempted to open a lawsuit. At the time we were in Florida. We now are in Ohio. But I spoke to a firm there and got through their first step of vetting, and then got a call from the case manager, and basically they wouldn't take it. They said that he chose to take the product and he chose to kill himself.
Wow.
And I said, there was no warnings on the packaging that says it can cause any kind of mental health issues. And he's like, doesn't matter. There's no recourse according to them.
This is what we know. This is what we know about the science. What Jay just presented, right? And we know THC causes psychosis, hands down. There's no questioning it. It has a 5-fold increase. Chronic psychosis, schizophrenia. We also know that the Delta-9 THC has a 7-fold increase for a risk of suicide. Now, they're putting this in more concentrated forms in the vapes that all 3 of your loved ones were using. The vapes are purposely designed by these elite legal drug predators to put a fast hit of THC to the brain. And then what happened? It doesn't matter if there's a family history of mental illness. It doesn't matter if they were diagnosed with any psychiatric conditions. That THC, that high concentrated THC, hands down, caused your loved ones to suffer.
Without a doubt.
And that's why
it's absolute poison.
And so I would say to the public, to the world, like this live stream, share this live stream.
Yes.
Share it with lawyers. Share it with the FDA. All 3 of these families are in touch with the FDA. And like Sonia said, Bluebell ice cream was taken off the shelf with just a little bit of harm. Yes. This is astronomical. Like, this is humongous. These products are everywhere. Gas stations, dollar stores, convenient marks. They can order them online. Jennifer's son was ordering these products online directly to his house in a package that was concealed. And then they're putting the flavors in, because if our loved ones were consuming these products without the flavors, they'd say, oh, gross. That tastes awful. And they throw it away because it's so toxic. It's so lethal.
Aubrey, I also want to say this, that so a lot of kids and middle schoolers are vaping nicotine, right? And a lot. So, and the thing is, a lot of parents don't know because it's so easy to conceal. They can't smell it, But so towards the end, I was always looking for Joshua's pen, his dab pen. Mm-hmm. So he's like, I'm not, Mom, I'm not, what? And I check his room and everything. Turns out he was using the Delta-8 because they look like the vapes.
Yes.
Right? They can look like a jewel, essentially.
Yeah, like a jewel. So there's, like that. So we found the box, the Cake 8. What was it?
It's called Cake. Brand.
Cake. And that's the exact brand that Brian had in his room. And I wanted to say too, and not to interrupt, but like on the suing part of it, I never wanted the money from that. I think that I wanted to, and a lot of people misconstrue as parents as like they're trying to get rich off Delta, or they're trying to blame something else. Here's my thing. It made no sense why my son went out back and shot himself. No sense. No. I talked to Brian at 11 p.m. that night. He says, I'll see you in the morning, Mom. He said, I love you. And I said, Bub, you sure you're okay? Because like Jennifer, I'm like, man, he's acting a little off. but nothing alarming to where I would have been like, I need to, seek help immediately. I've worked in the medical field for 15 years. I've seen, and I blame myself for that because I'm like, I should have known. As a parent, you feel like you should have known, but then I realized I didn't know because Brian, I think at times he was in his right mind, and then he'd start vaping that stuff, and then immediately he would go into another place. And I think that it was like you said, it didn't seem like it was my child. It was a different person, I guess.
Completely different person, right?
Right. And
really evil too. I mean, I know that's a whole other part to it, but it is so evil. And just from looking at Joshua's drawings, I can only imagine what he was dealing with for him to end his life.
It's so common with us because Brian was ordering it on the internet. I was getting packages. All his check would go to it, except he would send me money every week. And he said, Mom, I'm 19. I want to send you money, as rent. But he drew some pretty.
Right. Same here.
And I never, when I went on the doctor's show, that was my personal, I felt like that was mine. That was all I had left, even as morbid as they seemed. You hold on to things. But, and like I said, it was more, I've always said, I don't care about money. I want to raise awareness because
exactly.
I watched.
And hit them hard, instead of them profiting off of, killing our children, we need to,
I figured it was the only way, only kind of way that they would hear the message. They don't care about anything else. So that's the only way I could think of to try to get.
Only if it hits their pocket.
And that's kind of where I was going with it. I'm like, man, if I can call this lawyer, at least it'll get out there on the news, maybe.
Yeah.
And
stop one person from.
The news will not cover it. The news and the newspaper doesn't. I've already talked to a friend of mine's actually worked for the Houston Chronicle. They refuse to touch this. This would be a big story.
I've submitted a lot of op-eds to the Houston Chronicle that they never published.
Yeah, they won't. Because it's controlled by the big guys, and they're not going to allow that.
And like Aubrey, you got me hooked up with the doctor's show, and it was amazing. After that, the coverage, I had a lot of parents contacting me, but it doesn't always stay that way, and I feel like that. And I've been watching Aubrey. I keep up with Every Brain Matters, and I work long hours, and that's really no excuse. But I mean, when I got this opportunity, when she contacted me, I was like, this is perfect. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like the more of us parents get together with Aubrey and say, looky here, it can't be coincidence. My son was drawing things. Your son was drawing things. Your son was buying things on the internet. So was yours. So was mine. They were all.
So here's a question I have So in middle school, are kids allowed to even vape? Are there any consequences?
Yeah.
They actually have vape monitors. Like they were putting like security in all the bathrooms because and I don't
so there's zero tolerance.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Just FYI, we only got a few minutes left here, but I do know, and I won't say any names because it was somebody who came forward who wanted to talk about this, but she was a teenager. She is a teenager, and she was saying that the secondhand vapors from all the vaping in the bathrooms in our high schools were so bad she wouldn't go to the bathroom all day long when she was at school. So that's an issue, right? That's a huge problem. And go ahead.
Breeley, I can remember Breeley would get made fun of because she would speak out so much on the Delta that she wouldn't even talk about it really anymore.
Yeah.
And I mean, she found her brother.
Yeah.
My 16-year-old walked behind our pole barn, and like, if you watched you go on Brian's Legacy page, they give a good thing on Delta. And also it kind of tells Brian's story, but like, it's horrible, but she struggled with it. And she used to be really raising awareness. And even when we did the interview with you, Aubrey, it was so emotional for her that she's just like, I don't know if I want people to see my part of the interview. Kids are mean. They're making fun of me because they smoke THC and they're saying that I'm ruining, talking bad about it. And I'm like, that is what we've created. That's the world we live in. Yeah. It is such a big industry and a big thing that to speak out, it's like nobody wants you to talk about it or speak out about it, you know?
And I guess, my experience has been a little different. I never had even heard of it before all of this. And when I shared, I was open pretty quickly, both about suicide and about the Delta-8, because it's important to me to be transparent so that others can be helped. And so many of my friends and family also had never heard of it, much less knew that it posed any danger. Some knew of it, but had no idea that it had these kind of.
Aubrey, I invited Aubrey to speak at Joshua's memorial, right? I was just like, Aubrey, please come and tell everybody about this, and then people were like, are you sure you want to do that? I'm like, yes, I'm positive.
And I didn't know, that's the thing. I didn't know about Delta-8 until I found it in Brian's room. And I was like, what the hell is Delta-8?
Well, now more people are going to know about Delta-8.
So my daughter was like, my 23-year-old's like, well, I'll Google it. We Googled Delta-8, and then Aubrey reached out to me, and I'm like, have you heard of this? Am I the only one that doesn't know what the hell this is? And
you know what? If people want to know more, all you have to do is go to Twitter and put in Delta-8 psychosis, and you're going to see all these people tweeting, I'm in the hospital. I got psychosis. Don't do this. Just you'll see it. Go to Reddit and you'll find all these people talking about it, and nurses and doctors saying, wow, we're getting all these people coming in for Delta-8.
Well, and Aubrey has, I've been on the Every Brain Matter sites, and they give a great, I actually was, I don't know if you guys see me, Aubrey, but I'm taking pictures of the slides. And I'm doing that because at home I can be like, Every Brain Matters, look at this, look at this, look at this.
We need to get those pamphlets and take them to middle schools.
Yeah.
Or to schools and stuff.
I would like some too, Aubrey. I don't know how we could do that, but I would like some too.
Okay. Well, what we need is the viewers to donate so we can print these out and mail them to people. We have them on the website where you can print them out on your own. That's an expense. Okay. And but you can print them out directly from the website. But we're asking the viewers to donate.
Please donate to Every
Brain Matters. And like the families here were saying, when they want a lawsuit, it's not because they want the money. They want this to stop.
Yeah.
They don't want other families harmed. They don't want you to lose your kids. And we don't want more kids becoming mentally ill and suicidal and psychotic and addicted. Like, we've had enough. This is enough. Let's stop this madness. Why can't we have a competent government that does pass policies for our health and safety? All we see, all of the government doing, even the president of the United States should be funding a national education campaign and saying, outlaw these products right now.
They're not going to do
but
it.
Instead, he's got the pro-marijuana side.
Yep.
People just saying, look at this, look at that. We don't want anybody in jail for using marijuana. None of us want anybody in jail for using marijuana. We want you to stop selling these products, lying about them, and telling people that they're medicine and they're safe.
Right.
They're deadly, they're poison, they're lethal, they're toxic, and they need to come off the shelves. So to the president, to all the Congress people, we need you to hear these families, and we're going to come back and we're going to do this more and more. We're going to go live more and more. I think we could talk for another 2 hours. And I want these families to have a voice. And we have hundreds more. We're in the thousands now of families we're in contact with. Not everybody will speak up like these three families right here. So please pray for everybody and that somebody will wake up, because we have written tons of letters. I've gone face to face and spoke to my congressman, and we will continue to raise our voices. And I just want to give a shout out to Crystal, who's been making comments during our live stream. She currently has a son who's using the Delta products and is psychosis and hearing voices. And I've been in touch with her. I've given her the resources I have. So in the comments, if you have any more resources, please put it in. Julie Schauer just put in the comments too, to get a hold of the state legislators. This is dynamic. Please join state Parents Opposed to Pot Facebook groups and share the stories there too. And Julie just published a really good story with Anita Reddy today. It just, my heart stops every time, I read another story. And share that story just recently. It's on the Parents Opposed to Pot Twitter and Facebook accounts. You can share from there. All three of these families have shared their stories with us. Please support them. And I thank you all for being here. My heart is with you. I'm going to keep fighting and linking arms with you to do what I can to raise awareness. And we will do this again. And I love you guys. I love you. And we'll be in touch. Have a great weekend.
Everybody can add me on Facebook too. And if you look on Aubrey's, and I'm here, I've been through it. October 15th of 2021 is when Brian took his life. My 23-year-old, they all went through it. So I mean, we can vent together. I don't care, whatever you guys want, and we can rally if you want to. We can protest. I'm down for it all. So I'm
there. I'm a protester.
Yeah.
I just did it in Maryland, so I'm there. I'm like, I'm with you. I'm there. So you just let us know. And Every Brain Matters has 2 private Facebook groups, but just go to the website, join Brian's Legacy Facebook group, and we'll keep connecting, linking arms, and raise our voices. We got big plans. So hang in there, guys. We love you guys. We give you all applause. Big hugs, and we'll do this again.
Okay.
We've only just begun. Okay.
Happy holidays.
Happy
Bye.
holidays, everybody. Love you.